What if I told you? The divine masculine does not return to you in the final stage of union the way you imagined. What if the version of him that finally stands before you is quieter, calmer, almost unrecognizable? And what if that calmness is the loudest proof that everything has changed? In the early stages of the twin flame journey, the divine masculine often feels like a storm. He comes in intense, magnetic, almost overwhelming. The connection feels electric. The chemistry feels cosmic. There is passion, longing, obsession, sometimes even fear. He pursues, then retreats. He opens up, then shuts down. He promises, then disappears. And you, the divine feminine, are left wondering, why does he run? Why does he deny what is so obvious? Why does he fight something that feels destined? But here's the deeper truth no one prepares you for. The divine masculine you meet in the final stage of union is not the same man who once ran from you. He does not arrive breathless and desperate. He does not flood your phone with dramatic confessions. He does not return with chaos. He returns with presence. First, you might not even recognize it, because we've been conditioned to associate intensity with love. We mistake anxiety for passion. We mistake emotional volatility for depth. We mistake longing for devotion. But in the final stage of union, something subtle and powerful has shifted. The fire is still there. The magnetism is still there. The connection is still undeniable, but it no longer burns out of control. It glows. Let me ask you something. If he came back exactly the same fears, same ego, same avoidance, would that truly be union? Or would that simply be repetition? The final stage of union does not begin with external reunion. It begins with internal death. Before he can stand in front of you as your divine masculine in alignment, something inside him has to collapse. The old identity, the defensive armor, the false independence, the illusion that he could outrun destiny. There is a version of him that had to break. And breaking does not look romantic. It does not look poetic. It often looks like silence. Imagine this. He sits alone one night, no distractions, no noise, no validation from the outside world. The people he once leaned on feel distant. The ambitions that once fueled him feel hollow. The pride that once protected him feels heavy. And suddenly, the connection he tried to suppress rises back to the surface. Not as obsession, not as drama, but as truth. The final stage begins the moment he stops fighting what he feels. And here is the part that surprises many divine feminines. When he stops fighting internally, he stops performing externally. He no longer needs to prove. He no longer needs to impress. He no longer needs to chase. Because chasing was never alignment. Chasing was fear of losing control. In the early stages, he may have chased you when he felt you slipping away, not from devotion but from panic. The ego does not like losing what it cannot dominate. So he pursued when triggered, retreated when vulnerable, and oscillated between closeness and distance. But in the final stage of union, he does not move from panic. He moves from clarity. There is a quiet steadiness to him that wasn't there before. You may notice it in small ways. The way he looks at you, not scanning, not calculating, not guarding, just present. The way he listens, not waiting to defend himself, not planning his next response, just absorbing. The way he speaks, slower, intentional, measured. It almost feels grounded. And that grounding can feel unfamiliar. Because when you first met, it felt like lightning. Now it feels like earth. Which one is stronger? Lightning is dramatic. Earth is stable. Lightning shocks. Earth holds. The divine masculine in the final stage does not try to overpower the connection anymore. He becomes strong enough to hold it. And here is where many divine feminines become confused. They think, where is the intensity? Why isn't he overwhelmed? Why does this feel calm instead of consuming? But calm does not mean less love. Calm means regulated love. Let's explore that deeper. In the beginning, the connection triggered his deepest wounds: abandonment, inadequacy, fear of vulnerability, fear of failure. The intensity forced him to confront parts of himself he was not ready to face. So he ran. Not because he didn't love you, but because loving you meant dismantling himself. And dismantling is terrifying for the unawakened masculine. However, the final stage of union only happens after he has walked through that dismantling. He has felt the emptiness of running. He has felt the loneliness of ego. He has felt the cost of suppressing truth, and something inside him chooses differently, not impulsively, not dramatically, consciously. This is what makes the final stage powerful. It is not reactive. It is deliberate. He does not fall back into you. He steps toward you. There is a difference. Falling is emotional gravity. Stepping is intentional movement. In this stage, he understands what the connection is. He may not use spiritual language. He may not talk about energy or destiny. But internally, he knows this is not ordinary. And instead of trying to control it, he aligns with it. Let me ask you something profound. What is more powerful? A man who cannot live without you, or a man who could survive without you, but chooses you anyway? The divine masculine in the final stage of union does not choose from dependency. He chooses from sovereignty. He is no longer running from his emotions. He is no longer outsourcing his healing. He is no longer blaming timing, circumstances, or you. He has done the inner work. And inner work changes posture. You will see it in the way he carries himself. Less restless, less scattered, less defensive. There is a stillness behind his eyes. The boy who ran was fragmented. The man who returns is integrated. And that integration changes everything. Because union is not about two halves completing each other. It is about two wholes recognizing each other. So if you are waiting for him to come back with fireworks, you may miss the miracle. Because when he arrives in the final stage of union, he may not be loud. He may not be dramatic. He may not sweep you off your feet. He may simply stand there, grounded, open, unshaken. And in that steadiness, you will feel something deeper than intensity. You will feel safety. And safety is what makes union sustainable. So as we move deeper into this video, we are going to unpack layer by layer. What exactly died inside him? How does he communicate differently? How does he handle conflict? How does he express love? How do you know it's truly the final stage, and not another cycle? Because the truth is this: when the divine masculine reaches the final stage of union, he does not come back to repeat the past. He comes back transformed, and transformation is rarely loud. It is embodied. Stay with me, because what he does next and how he acts may completely change the way you understand union. Before the divine masculine can stand in union, something inside him has to die. And no, this is not poetic exaggeration. It is psychological. It is spiritual. It is existential. Because the final stage of union does not begin with romance. It begins with collapse. Let's go deeper. In the earlier phases of the twin flame journey, the divine masculine operates primarily from identity. The identity he built to survive. The confident one. The independent one. The rational one. The controlled one. The emotionally contained one. This identity works in the world. It earns money. It commands respect. It attracts partners. It maintains power. But it cannot survive the intensity of a true twin flame connection. Why? Because twin flames do not connect at the level of personality. They connect at the level of truth. And truth dissolves masks. When he first encounters the depth of this connection, something ancient inside him activates. He feels seen beyond his roles, beyond his achievements, beyond his armor. And that level of exposure is terrifying. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he has never learned how to exist without defense. So what does he do? He runs. He rationalizes. He minimizes. He distracts himself. He chooses logic over vulnerability. He convinces himself it's too intense, too complicated, too unrealistic. But here is what begins the shift toward the final stage. Running stops working. First, running gives relief, space, distance, control. He can breathe again. He can return to normal life. He can focus on work, friends, routine. But eventually, the silence becomes louder than the connection ever was. Because once you've been mirrored at the soul level, you cannot go back to surface level living without feeling the emptiness. And this is where the inner death begins. It does not happen dramatically. It happens slowly. It might start with restlessness, a subtle dissatisfaction with everything that once felt fulfilling, a quiet sense that something essential is missing. He may not consciously think of you at first. Instead, he questions himself. Why does success feel hollow? Why do relationships feel incomplete? Why does distraction no longer distract? And then the realization comes, not as obsession but as clarity. The connection was not the problem. His fear was. This realization cracks the identity open, because the version of him that ran depended on avoidance to survive. If he admits that fear drove him, then the entire foundation of who he thought he was begins to shake. And that shaking is the beginning of ego death. Now let's clarify something important. Ego death does not mean losing confidence. It does not mean becoming weak. It does not mean abandoning ambition. It means releasing the false self that was built on protection instead of authenticity. The old divine masculine identity was structured around * emotional suppression, * control over vulnerability, * detachment as strength, * independence as superiority. But in the final stage of union, those defenses collapse, and collapse feels like chaos. Imagine a man who has always prided himself on being rational, suddenly overwhelmed by emotion he cannot categorize. Imagine a man who has always avoided dependency, realizing that love does not equal weakness. Imagine a man who has always controlled outcomes, facing something he cannot control. This is not comfortable. In fact, it is disorienting. He may go through periods of isolation during this stage, not to escape you but to confront himself. The noise of the world becomes too loud. The opinions of others feel irrelevant. The image he maintained feels exhausting. And in that silence he meets his shadow. The shadow holds everything he avoided. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being abandoned. The fear of failing someone he deeply loves. The fear of losing control. And for the first time he does not run from those fears. He sits with them. That sitting is the death. Because the old identity relied on distraction. The new identity is born from integration. Let's explore a realistic scenario. Imagine a divine masculine who once blocked communication during conflict. He would disappear for days, claiming he needed space. In truth, he was avoiding vulnerability. During his inner transformation, he begins to see the pattern. He realizes that every time he withdrew, it was not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and didn't know how to handle it. That awareness stings. It forces accountability, and accountability dismantles ego. There may be moments where he feels regret. Not dramatic, self-punishing regret, but sober recognition. I hurt someone I loved because I was afraid. That sentence alone is transformative, because now the narrative shifts. Before he may have thought, she was too emotional. It was bad timing. It was complicated. Now he understands. I was unprepared to love at that depth. Do you see the difference? The external blame dissolves. The internal responsibility rises. And when responsibility rises, maturity follows. This is the turning point toward final union. Because union cannot exist where blame exists. Union requires ownership. The old identity dies when he stops defending his past behavior and starts understanding it. And here is something profound. He does not become softer. He becomes stronger. But the strength is different. Before, his strength was rigid. Now it is grounded. Before, he equated dominance with masculinity. Now, he understands presence is power. Let me ask you something. What is more courageous, running from love, or standing still while it transforms you? The divine masculine in the final stage has stood still. He has allowed himself to feel grief. Grief for missed opportunities. Grief for lost time. Grief for the version of himself that wasn't ready. But grief is not regression. It is purification. The old identity cannot survive grief because grief requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is the birthplace of true union. As this transformation deepens, something subtle shifts in his energy. He no longer resists thinking about you. He no longer tries to replace the connection. He no longer fights the pull. Instead, he begins to understand it. He sees the journey not as chaos but as initiation. An initiation into emotional adulthood. An initiation into sacred masculinity. And sacred masculinity does not dominate. It protects. It does not withdraw. It anchors. It does not perform. It embodies. By the time he reaches the final stage of union, the old identity has dissolved enough that he no longer fears intimacy. He respects it. He does not approach love as conquest. He approaches it as commitment. And commitment requires death of ego-driven freedom. Because true freedom is not the absence of attachment. It is the ability to choose attachment consciously. So when he returns, and we will explore this in the next parts, understand this. You are not meeting the same man. You are meeting the one who survived himself. The one who walked through dismantling. The one who faced his shadow. The one who let the mask crack. And that inner death is the silent prerequisite for lasting union. Because union is not the reunion of two bodies. It is the alignment of two evolved souls. And evolution always demands something to end before something new can begin. One of the clearest signs that the divine masculine has reached the final stage of union is this. He no longer reacts. He responds. At first glance, that may sound subtle, almost insignificant. But in the twin flame journey, that shift changes everything. In the early stages, the connection triggers him deeply. Every disagreement feels like threat. Every emotional conversation feels like pressure. Every expression of need feels like expectation he might fail to meet. And when someone feels threatened internally, they react. They defend. They deflect. They shut down. They lash out. They disappear. Reaction is survival mode. Think about the earlier dynamic. You bring up something vulnerable, maybe you say, "When you pulled away, it hurt me." Early stage divine masculine might respond with, "You're overthinking. I just needed space. Why are you making this a big deal?" Or worse, silence. The room gets tense. The energy becomes heavy. Walls go up instantly. Not because he doesn't care, but because he doesn't yet know how to sit inside emotional intensity without perceiving it as attack. Reaction is fast. Reaction is defensive. Reaction is ego protecting itself from perceived loss of control. Now contrast that with the divine masculine in the final stage of union. You say, "When you pulled away, it hurt me." And instead of reacting, he pauses. That pause is sacred. In that pause, something very different is happening. He is regulating. He is feeling the discomfort rise, but he is not running from it. He is not counterattacking. He is not collapsing into guilt either. He is choosing. Then he says something like, "I can see how that would hurt. I wasn't ready then. I'm trying to understand it now." Do you hear the difference? No defense. No blame. No emotional explosion. Just presence. This shift from reaction to response is one of the strongest indicators of masculine evolution, because responding requires awareness, and awareness requires inner work. Let's break this down psychologically. Reaction happens in the nervous system before the conscious mind has time to process. It is instinctual. It is rooted in past wounds, childhood patterns, unhealed trauma. If he grew up feeling criticized, he may react strongly to perceived disappointment. If he grew up feeling emotionally neglected, he may react by shutting down when vulnerability arises. If he learned that emotions equal weakness, he may react by dismissing them. But in the final stage of union, he has examined those patterns. He recognizes his triggers. And when he recognizes them, they lose power. Imagine this scenario. You disagree about something important, perhaps future plans, timing, or commitment. Earlier in the journey, that conversation may have spiraled quickly. He might have felt cornered. He might have felt pressured. He might have withdrawn for days to regain control. Now, he stays. He doesn't rush to solve it. He doesn't rush to escape it. He doesn't rush to dominate it. He sits in it. That sitting is emotional maturity, because responding means he is no longer governed by fear. He may say, "Let me think about that. I need a moment to process. I want to understand what you're really saying." This is not avoidance. This is conscious pacing. In the early stages, space was escape. In the final stage, space is integration. Do you see the transformation? Reaction is impulsive. Response is intentional. Reaction is about winning. Response is about understanding. Reaction is ego. Response is alignment. And this doesn't mean he becomes passive. It means he becomes grounded. If something truly doesn't feel aligned to him, he will say it calmly. He might respond with, "I don't see it that way, but I'm willing to talk through it. That's not what I intended. Let's clarify." No escalation. No power struggle. Just dialogue. Now let's go even deeper. The twin flame dynamic is known for emotional intensity. It exposes insecurities rapidly. It amplifies both love and fear. So when he reaches a stage where he can stay emotionally steady inside that intensity, it signals something profound. He has integrated his shadow. He no longer projects his wounds onto you. In earlier stages, projection was common. If he felt inadequate, he might accuse you of expecting too much. If he feared abandonment, he might distance himself first. If he felt overwhelmed, he might label the connection too much. Projection externalizes internal fear, but response internalizes responsibility. Instead of saying, "You make me feel pressured," he might now say, "I feel pressure inside myself when I think I'm not enough." That statement alone changes the entire energetic field, because vulnerability replaces defense, and vulnerability invites closeness instead of conflict. Let me ask you something powerful. What would your connection feel like if disagreements didn't feel like threats? If difficult conversations didn't feel like war? If silence didn't mean abandonment? That is what happens in the final stage. Conflict becomes constructive instead of destructive. He doesn't view emotional depth as chaos anymore. He views it as growth. This is especially noticeable in how he handles your emotions. Earlier, if you cried, he might have panicked. He might have tried to fix it quickly, or withdrawn because he didn't know what to do. Now, he stays steady. He doesn't rush to silence you. He doesn't dismiss your feelings. He doesn't take your emotions as accusation. He holds space. And holding space is one of the highest forms of divine masculine expression. It says, "I am strong enough to sit with your storm without being swept away by it." That strength is not loud. It is stable. And stability is what makes union sustainable. Another key sign of this shift is timing. Reaction is immediate. Response is measured. In the final stage, he understands that not every emotion requires instant action. He understands that feelings move, that triggers pass, that clarity comes when breathing replaces impulse. He may say, "I don't want to answer that from emotion. Let's talk tomorrow." And instead of disappearing, he returns the next day ready to engage. Consistency replaces volatility, and consistency builds trust. Trust is the foundation of final union, because without trust, even love feels unsafe. When he transitions from reaction to response, you will feel safer. Your nervous system will calm. Your heart will soften. Your intuition will relax, because chaos no longer dominates the connection. Now, here's something important. This transformation does not mean he never feels triggered again. It means he no longer allows triggers to dictate behavior. He feels them. He acknowledges them. He chooses differently. Choice is the hallmark of the evolved masculine. Earlier, he was driven by unconscious patterns. Now, he is guided by conscious decision. That is power. Real power is not control over others. It is control over self. And when the divine masculine reaches that level of self-mastery, union stops being a battlefield. It becomes a partnership. You are no longer navigating emotional landmines. You are building something stable. So as we continue this journey into understanding the final stage of union, remember this. One of the clearest signs that he is truly ready is not how intensely he loves you, but how calmly he handles what used to scare him. Because the boy reacted, the man responds, and response is where sacred union begins to take form. One of the most misunderstood signs of the final stage of twin flame union is this. Feels calm, not boring, not disconnected, not indifferent, but calm. And for many divine feminines, that calm can feel confusing at first, because the beginning of the twin flame journey was anything but calm. It was electric. You felt it in your chest, in your stomach, in your nervous system. The eye contact was magnetic. The conversations were intoxicating. The separation was devastating. Everything felt heightened, amplified, extreme. And now the divine masculine shows up steady, consistent, grounded. There are no dramatic declarations, no emotional roller coasters, no intense push-pull swings, just presence. So the question becomes, did the passion fade, or did it mature? In the early stages, intensity often masks instability. Intensity can feel like depth, but sometimes it is just two nervous systems colliding. When you first met, the connection activated unhealed wounds on both sides. Abandonment fears, control issues, validation needs, trauma bonds. All of it surfaced quickly. That intensity wasn't just love. It was triggering, and triggering can feel addictive. The highs are euphoric. The lows are unbearable. But when the divine masculine reaches the final stage of union, something profound happens. He no longer equates love with adrenaline. He no longer mistakes chaos for chemistry. He understands that intensity without stability cannot last. Let's paint a clear contrast. Early stage divine masculine. Asterisk texts constantly for a week, then disappears. Asterisk makes bold promises, then hesitates. Asterisk expresses passion, then pulls away. Asterisk feels deeply but cannot regulate. Final stage divine masculine. Asterisk communicates consistently. Asterisk speaks carefully. Asterisk shows up reliably. Asterisk feels deeply and remains grounded. There is still passion, but it is no longer volatile. It is anchored. Imagine a fire. In the beginning it was a wildfire. Bright, uncontrollable, consuming everything in its path. It felt powerful, but it also destroyed. Now, it is a hearth fire. Steady, contained, warm, intentional. Which one sustains life? Wildfire impresses. Hearthfire sustains. In the final stage of union, the divine masculine becomes the hearth. He becomes the stabilizing force. And this stability is not accidental. It is earned. Because after ego death, after shadow integration, after learning to respond instead of react, he understands something crucial. Love must feel safe to survive. Earlier in the journey, he may have confused safety with boredom. If there wasn't drama, he might have thought something was missing. If there wasn't intensity, he might have doubted the connection. But through growth he realizes, peace is not absence of love. Peace is presence without fear. Let me ask you something deeply reflective. If you are constantly anxious in a connection, is that passion or instability? If you are always waiting for the next emotional swing, is that chemistry or unpredictability? In the final stage, the divine masculine no longer feeds unpredictability. He understands that unpredictability creates insecurity, and insecurity erodes union. So instead of sweeping you off your feet with grand gestures, he builds something stronger. Consistency. Consistency may not feel dramatic, but it builds trust. Trust builds intimacy. Intimacy builds union. Let's explore how this shows up in real life. You send a message. Earlier, he might have taken hours or days to respond depending on his emotional state. You would analyze tone, timing, punctuation. Your nervous system would spike. Now, he replies when he says he will. Not obsessively, not urgently, just reliably. Or perhaps you discuss future plans. Earlier, he may have felt pressured and deflected the conversation. Now he engages. He may say, "I'm thinking long term. I want to build this slowly. I don't want to rush, but I'm committed." Notice the difference. No rush, no avoidance, just steady progression. This shift from intensity to stability is one of the most mature expressions of divine masculine energy. Because true masculine strength is not explosive. It is grounded. Grounded men do not need to overwhelm. They need to anchor. And anchoring is attractive in a deeper way. It calms your nervous system. It reduces anxiety. It creates emotional safety. And emotional safety is the soil where sacred love grows. Now here is the paradox. When intensity decreases, depth increases. Because without chaos clouding the connection, you can actually feel each other more clearly. There is space for meaningful conversation, space for vulnerability, space for laughter that isn't followed by fear. The connection feels less like obsession and more like alignment, less like craving and more like choosing. Let's go even deeper. In the early stage, intensity often came from fear of loss. The adrenaline of "will he stay?" fueled emotional spikes. But in the final stage, he does not operate from fear of losing you. He operates from certainty of choosing you, and certainty feels calm. Certainty does not scream. It does not panic. It does not chase. It stands. You may notice something subtle. He is less reactive to external stress. work problems, family issues, life pressure. He doesn't let external chaos spill into the relationship the way he once did, because he has built internal regulation. And internal regulation creates external stability. This is where many divine feminines experience a profound realization. They realize they are no longer bracing for impact. They are no longer anticipating withdrawal. They are no longer decoding mixed signals. Instead, they relax. And relaxation is sacred, because union cannot thrive in hypervigilance. It thrives in safety. So if you find yourself wondering, why does this feel quieter? Why does this feel less dramatic? Why does this feel steady instead of explosive? That might be your sign. The divine masculine in the final stage does not need intensity to prove love. He embodies love through reliability. And reliability is powerful. It says, I am not here for the rush. I am here to build. And building requires patience. It requires pacing. It requires long-term vision. The boy sought excitement. The man builds foundation. And foundation may not look cinematic, but it supports everything. So as we continue into the next layers of this journey, remember this. If the connection feels calmer, it does not mean it is weaker. It may mean it is finally strong enough to last. Because when stability replaces chaos, union stops being a dream and starts becoming reality. One of the most powerful and often overlooked signs that the divine masculine has reached the final stage of union is this. He takes responsibility, not defensively, not dramatically, not with self-punishment, but clearly, calmly, consciously. In the earlier stages of the twin flame journey, accountability felt threatening to him. To admit fault meant admitting weakness. To acknowledge mistakes meant confronting inadequacy. And inadequacy was one of his deepest fears. So instead of taking responsibility, he would explain, rationalize, minimize, redirect. Maybe you've experienced this. You said, when you disappeared, it hurt me. And he replied with, I just needed space. You're too sensitive. It wasn't a big deal. Notice what's happening there. He's not actually addressing the hurt. He's protecting himself from feeling like the villain. Because early-stage masculinity often confuses responsibility with shame. And shame feels unbearable. Shame says, I am wrong. I am flawed. I am not enough. So instead of stepping into accountability, he deflects it. But the final stage of union requires something different. It requires him to separate responsibility from identity, to understand that, I made a mistake, is not the same as, I am a mistake. That distinction changes everything. When the divine masculine integrates this lesson, you will hear it in the way he speaks. Instead of, I'm sorry you feel that way, you might hear, I see how my actions hurt you. Instead of, that wasn't my intention. You might hear, I didn't handle that well. Instead of, let's just move on. You might hear, I want to understand what I did so I don't repeat it. Do you feel the shift? There's no self-attack, no dramatic guilt spiral, no collapsing into self-hatred, just ownership. Ownership without shame. That is maturity, because shame paralyzes, accountability empowers. In the final stage, he does not crumble when confronted with his past behavior. He stands. He doesn't need to rewrite history to protect his ego. He doesn't need to justify the running phase. He doesn't need to blame timing, circumstances, or your emotions. He says internally and externally, I wasn't ready then. And that sentence carries weight, because it acknowledges growth. Let's explore this deeper. Imagine you bring up the separation period, the time he pulled away without explanation. Earlier in the journey, that conversation might have triggered defense. He might have said, I was overwhelmed. You don't understand what I was dealing with. I didn't know what I wanted. But now, he says, I was afraid, and I didn't know how to stay. That admission is powerful, because fear is vulnerable, and vulnerability is strength in evolved masculinity. He understands that protecting his image is less important than protecting the connection. That's a massive shift, because in the early stages, preserving his pride may have mattered more than preserving intimacy. Now, intimacy is sacred. He realizes that you cannot build union on unspoken wounds. So instead of avoiding uncomfortable conversations, he leans into them. But here's the key. He does not punish himself endlessly. This is important. Some people confuse growth with self-criticism, but evolved masculinity does not drown in regret. It learns. He might say, I regret how I handled things, but I'm not that version of myself anymore. That's not arrogance. That's integration. He has faced his shadow. He has felt remorse. He has processed it. And now he uses it as fuel for better behavior. This is where many divine feminines notice a profound energetic shift. You no longer feel like you have to convince him to see your pain. You no longer feel like you are teaching him empathy. He arrives already aware, already reflective, already conscious, and that awareness creates emotional safety, because accountability builds trust. Trust says, if something goes wrong, we can talk about it. In earlier stages, conflict might have felt like a threat to the relationship. Now, conflict becomes an opportunity for growth. And this shift is rooted in how he handles his own mistakes. Let's go even deeper. Why was accountability so difficult before? Because the old identity was built on control. Control over image. Control over emotion. Control over outcome. Admitting fault meant losing control. But through ego death, through the inner dismantling we discussed in part 2, he realizes something. Control is not strength. Integrity is. And integrity means aligning actions with values. In the final stage of union, he values truth more than pride. He values connection more than ego. He values growth more than being right. So when he apologizes, it feels different. It feels grounded, feels steady, feels like, I'm not perfect, but I'm accountable. And that kind of apology heals, because it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel performative. It doesn't feel temporary. It feels integrated. Let me ask you something important. Would you rather be with someone who never makes mistakes, or someone who makes mistakes and owns them? Perfection is unrealistic. Accountability is sustainable. And sustainability is what defines the final stage of union. The divine masculine no longer fears being imperfect. He fears being dishonest. He no longer defends his past actions at all costs. He examines them. And that examination strengthens him. You may even notice that he initiates accountability. He might say, I've been thinking about something I did before. I want to talk about it. That initiative shows internal reflection. It shows that growth is not reactive, it's proactive. He's not just responding to your concerns. He's evaluating himself independently. That is sovereignty. And sovereignty allows partnership without defensiveness. In the final stage of union, accountability becomes natural. Not forced. Not extracted. Not demanded. Natural. Because he understands that love without responsibility is fragile. And responsibility without shame is empowering. The boy avoided blame. The man accepts it when it's his. The boy feared being seen as wrong. The man values being honest. And honesty is the backbone of sacred union. So as we continue deeper into this exploration of how the divine masculine acts in the final stage, remember this. When he can say, I hurt you, without collapsing. When he can say, I was afraid, without hiding. When he can say, I want to do better, and mean it. That is not weakness. That is evolution. And evolution is what makes union possible. Not fantasy, not intensity, not obsession, but grounded, accountable love. Because real union is not built on perfection. It is built on integrity. One of the most profound transformations you will notice in the divine masculine during the final stage of union is this. He stops talking about love and starts living it. In the early phases of the twin flame journey, words often carried the connection. Long conversations, emotional confessions, intense declarations, promises about the future, late-night vulnerability that felt cosmic, and then silence, or inconsistency, or actions that didn't quite match the depth of what was said. Because in the early stage, the divine masculine may have felt the love deeply, but he didn't yet know how to anchor it in behavior. Feeling is not the same as embodying. And embodiment is what defines the final stage. When he reaches this level of maturity, devotion no longer looks dramatic. It looks consistent. Let's explore what that really means. Early stage devotion can look like, I can't stop thinking about you. I've never felt this way before. I don't want to lose you. But final stage devotion looks like, I will show up. I will stay. I will build. Notice the shift. Less emotional intensity in language. More strength in action. Because the evolved divine masculine understands something crucial. Words inspire. Actions secure. And security is what allows union to last. Let's imagine a simple real-life scenario. You're having a difficult week. You mention feeling overwhelmed. In the early stages, he might have responded with encouragement, beautiful words, empathy, emotional reassurance. But then he might have disappeared into his own world. In the final stage, he checks in. Not obsessively, not performatively, but steadily. How are you feeling today? Did that meeting go okay? Do you need anything from me? And if you say you're exhausted, he might adjust plans. Offer help. Take initiative. That's devotion. It's subtle. It doesn't scream. But it builds trust brick by brick. Devotion expressed through action means his behavior aligns with his intentions. If he says he wants to build a future, he begins discussing logistics. If he says he values communication, he practices it. If he says he's committed, he removes ambiguity from his life. He doesn't leave gray areas. He doesn't keep backup options. He doesn't maintain emotional distance just in case. He doesn't test your loyalty through silence. He chooses you in tangible ways. And that choice feels different. It feels grounded. Earlier in the journey, devotion may have been impulsive, fueled by longing, fear of loss, or emotional intensity. Now it is deliberate. He is not acting from adrenaline. He is acting from clarity. Let's go deeper into what that clarity creates. In the early stages, he may have felt devotion internally but struggled to express it externally. He didn't know how to balance independence with partnership. He feared losing himself. But in the final stage, he understands. Devotion is not self-sacrifice. It is alignment. He does not abandon his identity to love you. He integrates you into his life consciously. That integration shows up in small but powerful ways. He introduces you confidently into his world. He speaks about you with respect. He makes decisions that consider your presence. He doesn't treat you like a temporary emotion. He treats you like a long-term reality. And here's something profound. Devotion in the final stage is protective but not possessive. He protects the connection energetically and practically. Energetically, he guards it from negativity. Practically, he makes choices that strengthen it. For example, if someone from his past reaches out in a way that feels inappropriate, he doesn't entertain it for ego validation. He shuts it down. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, but clearly, because he understands that devotion is demonstrated in boundaries. And boundaries are a mature expression of love. Let me ask you something. Is devotion measured by how intensely someone feels, or by how consistently someone acts? Feelings fluctuate. Actions reveal commitment. The divine masculine in the final stage understands this. He no longer tries to impress you with grand gestures. He impresses you with reliability. He becomes predictable in the healthiest way. You know he will respond. You know he will show up. You know he will follow through. And predictability creates safety. Safety creates intimacy. Intimacy deepens union. This shift may initially feel less exciting, but over time you realize something powerful. Peace feels better than chaos, because you are no longer analyzing mixed signals. You are no longer decoding inconsistency. You are no longer wondering if his words will dissolve tomorrow. You trust his behavior. And trust is the foundation of sacred partnership. Let's explore another scenario. You have a disagreement. Earlier in the journey, he might have avoided it, or apologized emotionally but failed to change behavior. Now, if you express a need, he evaluates it seriously. If the need is reasonable, he adapts. If he cannot meet it, he communicates honestly. But he does not dismiss it. That's devotion. Because devotion is not about pleasing. It's about honoring. Honoring your presence. Honoring your feelings. Honoring the shared path. And honoring requires action. Another subtle sign of this transformation is pacing. He no longer rushes milestones to satisfy emotional urgency. He builds step by step, plans thoughtfully, discusses openly, moves intentionally. He does not want temporary euphoria. He wants sustainable union. And sustainability requires patience. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. In the early stage, the divine masculine may have loved you in feeling. In the final stage, he loves you in structure. He creates space for you, time for you, stability with you. Love becomes something that fits into daily life, not something that only exists in heightened moments. And that integration is powerful, because love that only exists in intensity cannot survive reality. But love that exists in routine becomes unshakable. The boy said, "I feel so much for you." The man says, "I'm here." And being here consistently is the highest form of devotion. So if you find yourself wondering, why isn't he overwhelming me like before? Why does this feel steady instead of explosive? Look closer. He may not be overwhelming you with emotion, but he is anchoring you with presence. He may not be promising the moon, but he is building the ground beneath your feet. And ground is what allows love to stand. Because in the final stage of union, devotion is no longer a feeling he experiences. It is a commitment he lives. And living devotion day by day, choice by choice, is what transforms a twin flame connection from destiny into reality. There is a moment in the final stage of twin flame union where something subtle, yet incredibly powerful, shifts inside the divine masculine. He steps into leadership, but not the kind the world taught him. Not dominance, not control, not superiority, sacred leadership. And sacred leadership looks very different from ego-driven authority. In the early stages of the journey, the divine masculine may have confused control with strength. He might have believed that to lead meant to decide unilaterally, that to be masculine meant to suppress vulnerability, that to maintain power meant to avoid appearing emotionally influenced. This belief often came from conditioning, family, society, culture. Many men were taught that leadership means being unaffected, that emotions are distractions, that partnership must not compromise independence. So when the twin flame connection activated his heart deeply, it felt destabilizing. Because now he cared deeply, and caring makes you sensitive. Sensitive to loss, sensitive to rejection, sensitive to failure. And early on, that sensitivity scared him. So he tried to regain balance through subtle control. Maybe he set the pace unpredictably. Maybe he withdrew to regain upper hand. Maybe he avoided defining the relationship to maintain emotional leverage. Not maliciously, but defensively. Because control feels safe when vulnerability feels risky. But in the final stage of union, something changes. He realizes that control does not create safety. Presence does. And presence requires openness, not dominance. Sacred leadership begins when he understands that his strength is not threatened by your power. Let's pause there. In many twin flame dynamics, the divine feminine carries deep intuitive strength, emotional depth, spiritual awareness, vision, sensitivity. In earlier stages, this intensity may have felt overwhelming to him. He might have unconsciously competed with it, dismissed it, or felt challenged by it. But in the final stage, he honors it. He does not compete with your intuition. He does not silence your voice. He does not minimize your emotional intelligence. He integrates it, because sacred leadership is not about standing above. It is about standing steady, and steadiness is magnetic. Imagine this scenario. You bring an intuitive insight about the relationship, something you feel deeply but cannot fully explain. Early stage divine masculine might respond with logic. That doesn't make sense. You're reading too much into it. Let's not overthink. Final stage divine masculine responds differently. He may say, "I don't fully understand it yet, but I trust that you feel it." That sentence is powerful because it shows respect. Respect for your inner world. Respect for your perception. Respect for the emotional landscape between you. Sacred leadership means he no longer sees partnership as hierarchy. He sees it as alignment. He understands that real masculine strength does not overpower feminine wisdom, stabilizes it. Let's go deeper into what this looks like in everyday life. He begins making decisions that consider both of you, not because he feels obligated, but because he feels responsible. Responsibility in sacred masculinity is not heavy, it is chosen. He might initiate conversations about the future, not to control outcomes, but to co-create vision. He might say, "Where do you see this going? What kind of life do we want to build?" Notice the difference. He's not dictating. He's inviting. That invitation is leadership without control. It says, "I'm strong enough to guide, but humble enough to listen." This balance is rare, because many people swing between extremes, either dominating or withdrawing, but the evolved divine masculine does neither. He stands grounded in himself. Grounded men do not need to assert power constantly. Their calm presence speaks for itself. Let me ask you something. What feels safer? A man who raises his voice to assert authority, or a man who lowers his voice and remains steady? The latter. Because volume is insecurity, calmness is confidence. Sacred leadership means he does not escalate during conflict. He de-escalates. If tension rises, he grounds it. If emotions intensify, he steadies the space. He becomes the emotional container, not the emotional disruptor. This is profound, because in earlier stages he may have been reactive, defensive, or avoidant during conflict. Now, he remains engaged. He does not shut down. He does not overpower. He does not retreat into silence. He listens. He speaks. He stays. Staying is leadership. Not staying physically, staying emotionally, because many men can remain in a room but leave emotionally. Sacred masculinity stays present, even when uncomfortable, even when challenged, even when vulnerable. Another key shift is how he handles your independence. In earlier stages, he might have felt threatened if you were too self-sufficient, or insecure if you did not appear dependent on him. But in the final stage, he celebrates your strength. He does not need you to be small to feel big. He feels big because he is aligned. This is mature masculinity. It protects without possessing. It leads without controlling. It guides without overpowering. Protection in sacred leadership is subtle. It may look like standing up for you calmly in a social setting, ensuring your safety without announcing it, taking initiative in practical matters, creating structure where needed, but it never feels suffocating, because it is rooted in care, not ownership. Let's explore one more powerful example. You face an external challenge, maybe work stress, family tension, or personal doubt. Early stage divine masculine might have tried to fix it quickly or withdrawn because he didn't know how to help. Final stage divine masculine says, "What do you need from me right now?" That question is leadership. It offers support without assumption. It creates space without imposing. Sacred leadership recognizes that love is not control over someone's path. It is support along it. And here is the deepest shift of all. He no longer fears being emotionally influenced by you. Earlier, he may have equated emotional impact with weakness. Now, he understands that love naturally affects you. And allowing yourself to be affected does not diminish strength. It enhances it. The boy resisted emotional influence. The man integrates it. The boy guarded his autonomy at all costs. The man understands that partnership does not erase autonomy. Sacred leadership in the final stage of union feels like this. You feel guided, not directed. You feel supported, not managed. You feel safe, not restricted. And safety is the cornerstone of lasting union. So if you are wondering how the divine masculine acts in the final stage of union, watch for this. Does he create emotional stability without needing to control the narrative? Does he listen without losing himself? Does he lead without overpowering? If the answer is yes, then you are witnessing sacred masculinity emerging. Because true masculine power is not loud. It is steady. It is protective without dominance. It is strong without rigidity. It is leadership born from integration, not insecurity. And when sacred leadership replaces control, union stops feeling like a power struggle and starts feeling like partnership. One of the most delicate and transformative shifts in the final stage of twin flame union is this. The divine masculine becomes emotionally available without becoming emotionally dependent. And that balance is rare, because in the early stages of the journey, Emotional energy tends to swing between two extremes: avoidance and attachment, withdrawal and clinging, distance and desperation. When the connection first activates, it often overwhelms him. The depth of feeling feels unfamiliar. The vulnerability feels exposing. The intensity feels destabilizing. So he pulls away, not because he doesn't feel, but because he feels too much and doesn't know how to regulate it. Then, during separation or fear of loss, he may swing the other direction. He may cling emotionally, reach out impulsively, seek reassurance, try to regain closeness quickly. Both of these patterns, avoidance and dependency, are rooted in fear. Avoidance says, if I detach, I won't get hurt. Dependency says, if I hold on tightly, I won't lose it. Neither is true emotional availability. True emotional availability requires sovereignty. It requires the ability to feel deeply without losing self. And this is what changes in the final stage of union. The divine masculine no longer runs from vulnerability, but he also no longer collapses into you. He stands in himself and meets you there. Let's explore what this looks like in real, tangible ways. In earlier stages, if you asked him how he felt about something, he might have responded vaguely, "I don't know. It's fine. It's whatever." Or he might have avoided the question entirely. Emotional articulation was uncomfortable, but in the final stage, something shifts. He begins to name his feelings. I felt insecure when that happened. I was overwhelmed. I got scared of losing control. Notice how different that is. He is not blaming you. He is not dismissing the conversation. He is not shutting down. He is revealing. Revealing requires strength. But here is the key difference. He does not reveal in order to be rescued. He reveals to be understood. That distinction matters deeply. Emotional dependency says, I need you to regulate me. I need you to validate me constantly. I need you to calm my anxiety. Emotional availability says, I can regulate myself, but I want to share my internal world with you. The evolved divine masculine understands that partnership is not emotional outsourcing. It is emotional sharing. Let's imagine a scenario. He has a stressful day at work. Something triggers feelings of inadequacy. Early stage divine masculine might withdraw entirely, or act irritable, or project frustration onto the relationship. Now, he communicates. Today was heavy. It made me question myself a little. He doesn't expect you to fix it. He doesn't demand reassurance. He doesn't disappear. He simply shares. And sharing builds intimacy. But it does not create dependency. This balance is powerful, because dependency creates pressure. Pressure destabilizes union. But availability creates connection. Connection strengthens union. Let's go deeper into vulnerability. In the early stages, vulnerability felt dangerous to him. Felt like losing control. Felt like exposing weakness. But after ego death and shadow integration, he realizes something profound. Vulnerability does not weaken him, humanizes him. He becomes more comfortable expressing affection directly, instead of hinting, instead of implying, instead of withdrawing when things get serious. He might say, I care about you deeply. This connection matters to me. I want to protect what we have. And he says it calmly, not from panic, not from fear of losing you, from grounded truth. Here is another important shift. He no longer tests your loyalty through distance. In earlier stages, he may have unconsciously pulled away to see if you would chase, or remained emotionally ambiguous to maintain control. But in the final stage, he doesn't need reassurance through manipulation. He trusts the connection. Trust removes the need for games. Now let's explore the other side of the equation. Emotional availability also means he can handle your emotions without absorbing them destructively. Earlier, your emotional intensity might have overwhelmed him. If you were anxious, he became anxious. If you were upset, he shut down. But now, he remains steady. If you express sadness, he does not panic. If you express frustration, he does not retreat. He listens. He supports. But he does not collapse. Because he has built emotional boundaries within himself. Boundaries are not walls. They are stability. He understands that loving someone does not mean merging identities. It means standing whole beside another whole. Let me ask you something reflective. What feels more secure? A partner who cannot function without you, or a partner who chooses you while remaining grounded in himself? The second, because choice feels empowering, neediness feels fragile. The divine masculine in the final stage chooses you. He is not with you because he cannot survive alone. He is with you because alignment feels right. This is sacred interdependence. Not independence that avoids closeness. Not codependence that erases individuality, but interdependence. Two strong individuals supporting each other. This balance shows up in conflict too. If disagreement arises, he does not withdraw emotionally. But he also does not beg for immediate reconciliation out of fear. He might say, "I need a little time to think, but I'm not going anywhere." That statement is emotionally available and emotionally sovereign at the same time. He acknowledges the need for space without threatening the connection. He holds tension without abandoning the bond. That is maturity. Another powerful sign of this transformation is how he expresses affection. In earlier stages, affection might have come in waves. Intense closeness followed by emotional absence. Now, it flows steadily. He doesn't disappear when things get serious. He doesn't pull back when vulnerability deepens. He remains. Consistency in emotional presence creates safety, and safety allows deeper union. The boy feared emotional exposure. The man understands emotional exposure builds trust. The boy leaned on distance for control. The man leans into presence for connection. Emotional availability without dependency means he can say, "I love you," without needing you to say it back immediately. He can express care without seeking validation in return. He can support you without losing himself. And that is rare, because it requires deep self-work. It requires him to heal his abandonment wounds, to soothe his insecurities internally, to face the fear of rejection without collapsing. By the time he reaches the final stage of union, he has done enough inner integration to understand this. Love is not possession. Love is not fear. Love is not control. Love is presence. And presence requires stability within. So if you are wondering how the divine masculine acts in the final stage of union, look for this balance. Does he open up emotionally without clinging? Does he stay present without losing himself? Does he share his heart without demanding ownership? If the answer is yes, then you are witnessing sacred emotional maturity. Because true union is not about emotional fusion. It is about emotional alignment. And alignment only happens when two sovereign beings meet, open, steady, and free. That is the essence of emotional availability without dependency. And it is one of the clearest signs that final union is no longer a dream. It is becoming real. Before the final stage of union becomes visible in behavior, it becomes visible in energy. And if you've walked the twin flame journey long enough, you know exactly what I mean. Because this connection has never been purely physical. It has always been energetic, telepathic, intuitive, subtle, unspoken. In the early stages, the energy between you may have felt overwhelming, magnetic, almost chaotic. You could feel when he was thinking about you. You could sense when he was pulling away. Your mood shifted with his distance. Your heart raced when he reached out. It was electric, but it was unstable. There was intensity, but there was also anxiety. You felt pulled toward each other and pushed apart at the same time. Now, in the final stage of union, something changes. The energy becomes quiet, not absent, not dull, quiet. And quiet can feel confusing at first, because we have been conditioned to associate love with emotional turbulence. We think love should make us restless, make us obsess, make us uncertain. But sacred union does not feel like obsession, feels like knowing. Let's explore what this energy shift really feels like. First, the anxiety fades. You are no longer constantly checking your phone. You are no longer interpreting every pause in communication. You are no longer feeling that tightness in your chest when he takes space. Instead, there is a calm baseline. You trust the connection. Even when you are not physically together, even when communication slows, there is an underlying certainty. Feels like he's not running anymore. And even if he's quiet, the silence does not feel threatening. Feels steady. In the early stages, silence felt like abandonment. Now silence feels neutral. That is an energetic shift. Let me ask you something deeply reflective. Have you ever noticed that when someone is truly aligned with you, you don't feel anxious about them? You just feel settled. That settlement is not boredom. It is nervous system regulation. The final stage of union feels safe to your nervous system. And that safety allows you to relax into yourself again. You are not hypervigilant. You are not chasing. You are not bracing for impact. Instead, you feel anchored. And anchoring is magnetic in a different way. The magnetism becomes softer but deeper. In the early stage, the magnetism felt like fireworks. In the final stage, it feels like gravity. Fireworks explode. Gravity holds. Gravity doesn't need to announce itself. Just exists. That's what this energy shift feels like. Another powerful sign is the change in intuitive communication. Earlier in the journey, you may have felt his emotional fluctuations intensely. When he was confused, you felt confusion. When he was distant, you felt restless. When he was thinking about you, you felt sudden waves of emotion. The connection was loud. But in the final stage, the intuitive link becomes steady. You still feel him, but it's no longer chaotic. You may suddenly think of him and feel warmth instead of longing. You may sense his presence without needing validation. There's less emotional spike, more emotional flow, and that flow creates peace. Here's something interesting. The divine feminine often senses this shift before physical reunion happens. She may wake up one day and realize the energy feels different. There's less tension, less emotional tug-of-war, less internal drama. Even if they are not speaking consistently yet, something feels aligned. That alignment is internal union reflecting outward. 'Cause remember, physical reunion is the result. Energetic alignment is the cause. And when the divine masculine completes his inner transformation, his energy stabilizes. He is no longer oscillating between fear and longing. He is no longer battling his own emotions. He is settled. And when he settles, the energetic field between you stabilizes too. Let's explore this through a subtle example. Imagine you haven't spoken in a few days. In earlier stages, those days would feel heavy. You would overanalyze, question, wonder if something was wrong. Now, there is space but no panic. You trust that if he needs to speak, he will. You feel the connection even in stillness. That trust is energetic maturity. It means your bond is no longer built on reaction. It's built on resonance. Resonance feels like this. You both move independently, but you still feel connected. You both grow separately, but you still sense alignment. It's not obsessive. It's stable. And stability is powerful. Another sign of this energy shift is the reduction of emotional volatility during interaction. When you do speak, conversations feel lighter, less charged, less defensive, less loaded. There's space for humor, space for softness, space for natural rhythm. You're no longer navigating landmines. You're flowing. And flow is effortless. Effortless does not mean careless. It means aligned. Let me ask you something. When something is truly meant for you, does it feel like constant struggle or quiet certainty? The final stage of union feels like certainty, not because everything is perfect, but because both of you have stopped fighting the connection. The divine masculine is no longer internally resisting, and that internal surrender changes the entire energetic frequency. Resistance creates friction. Surrender creates harmony, and harmony is felt before it is spoken. You may notice that dreams about him feel different too. Earlier, dreams may have been intense, emotional, symbolic. Now they feel calm, peaceful, almost ordinary but meaningful. It's as if the subconscious is no longer processing chaos. It's integrating union. And here is something profound. When the energy stabilizes, the urgency fades. Earlier, there was urgency, a need to define, a need to fix, a need to resolve immediately. Now, there is patience. Patience signals trust. Trust signals alignment. And alignment signals readiness. The boy felt urgency because he feared loss. The man feels patience because he trusts the bond. The boy's energy was scattered. The man's energy is centered. Centered energy feels calm but powerful. Like a mountain. It doesn't move dramatically, but it is immovable. And when the divine masculine reaches this centered state, you feel it. You feel safe. You feel chosen. You feel grounded, even before he speaks the words. So if you are wondering whether the final stage of union is approaching, ask yourself, does the connection feel calmer? Does your anxiety decrease? Does the silence feel neutral instead of threatening? Does the energy feel steady instead of chaotic? Yes, then you are likely witnessing the energetic foundation of union forming, because union does not explode into existence, settles into place, and when it settles, you don't feel fireworks, you feel peace. And peace in the twin flame journey is the strongest sign of all, because chaos is what starts the awakening, but peace is what sustains the union. After everything we've explored, the ego death, the shift from reaction to response, the stability replacing chaos, the accountability without shame, the devotion expressed through action, the sacred leadership without control, the emotional availability without dependency, and the energetic calm you can feel, we arrive at the final truth. Union is not an event, it is a choice. And in the final stage of the twin flame journey, the divine masculine does something he could not do before. He chooses. Not impulsively, not out of fear, not because he is overwhelmed, not because he cannot survive without you. He chooses consciously, and that choice is the culmination of everything he has become. Let's go back to the beginning for a moment. When you first met, it felt destined, magnetic, fated, as if the universe orchestrated every detail to bring you together. But destiny alone is not enough. Fate may spark the connection, but choice sustains it. In the early stages, he may have felt pulled toward you by forces he didn't understand. The chemistry was undeniable. The emotional depth was unmatched. The recognition felt immediate. But he wasn't ready to choose it, because choosing meant responsibility. Choosing meant vulnerability. Choosing meant committing to something that would change him. And change is terrifying when you're still attached to your old identity. So he hesitated. He oscillated. He loved, but he didn't anchor. Now, in the final stage of union, something profound happens. He understands that love is not something that happens to him. It is something he participates in. That shift transforms everything. Because when he chooses you consciously, he is no longer reacting to fate. He is aligning with purpose. And purpose feels grounded. Let me ask you something powerful. What is more meaningful, being swept away by love, or standing still and saying, I am here because I want to be? The second, because intention creates stability, and stability creates lasting union. The divine masculine in the final stage does not return as the boy who ran from intensity. He arrives as the man who understands commitment. And commitment in sacred masculinity is not restrictive. It is expansive. He no longer sees partnership as losing freedom. He sees it as building something greater than himself. This is the real meaning of union. Not fireworks, not obsession, not constant emotional highs, but two individuals who have done their inner work, choosing to build together. Let's explore how this choice feels in action. He does not rush into dramatic declarations. He speaks calmly. I want this. I'm ready. I see a future here. And when he says it, you feel the difference, because his energy matches his words. There is no trembling uncertainty, no underlying panic, no unspoken doubt, just clarity. Clarity is powerful. It removes ambiguity. It dissolves confusion. It stabilizes the connection. And when he chooses consciously, he removes gray areas. He does not keep one foot out the door. He does not leave emotional escape routes. He does not hold back just in case. He steps in fully, not recklessly, but intentionally. This is sacred union. The boy loved in moments. The man loves in commitment. The boy chased intensity. The man builds foundation. The boy feared losing control. The man understands that surrendering ego is strength. And here is something important. Union does not mean perfection. There will still be challenges, still be growth, still be evolution. But now those challenges are faced together. Not from opposing sides, but from alignment. Because he has chosen the partnership. And partnership means facing life as a team. In the final stage, he no longer sees you as a threat to his independence. He sees you as a reflection of his wholeness. That is the deepest transformation of all. Because earlier in the journey, the connection exposed his wounds. Now it reflects his healing. Earlier, being with you meant confronting fear. Now, being with you means expressing strength. Let's go even deeper. True union is not about completing each other. It is about recognizing each other. You are not half waiting for your other half. You are whole. He is whole. And from that wholeness you choose each other. Choice from wholeness is powerful. It is not driven by lack. It is not fueled by insecurity. It is not sustained by anxiety. It is anchored in alignment. That is why the final stage feels calm. Because calm is the absence of fear. And when fear dissolves, love becomes clear. The divine masculine's final act in this journey is not a grand gesture. It is a grounded decision. To stay. To build. To protect. To honor. To love without running. And when he makes that decision, something inside you softens. Because you no longer feel like you're fighting for the connection. You feel like you're standing in it. Let me ask you one final question. If he never returned dramatically, if there were no fireworks, if there were no cinematic moments, but he stood beside you steadily, day after day, would that be enough? Because that is what sacred union looks like. It is not about spectacle. It is about sustainability. It is not about proving love. It is about practicing love. And when the divine masculine reaches this stage, he understands that love is not measured by how intensely you feel in one moment. It is measured by how consistently you choose each other across time. So if you are on this journey, remember this. Union is not something you chase. It is something you align with. When you both do the inner work, when you both face your shadows, when you both integrate your wounds, love stops being chaotic and starts being conscious. The boy who ran was afraid of losing himself. The man who returns knows that in choosing love, he finds himself. And that is the true meaning of twin flame union. Not destiny alone, not passion alone, but conscious choice. If this message resonated with you, share in the comments. Where are you in your journey right now? Are you feeling the energy shift? Are you noticing the calm? Are you witnessing the transformation? And if you're ready to explore deeper layers of the twin flame path, from runner to king, from chaos to sacred alignment, subscribe to this channel and continue walking this journey with us. Because union does not begin when he returns. It begins when both of you become who you were always meant to be.